All right, I think we are live for episode 175. Coincidentally, that's what the temperature is outside of where I am right now. Sorry for the technical difficulties. A lot of things had to happen. A lot of balls up in the air right now. But how are you doing this morning, Bill?
Doing well. Thank you for making it happen, given all the challenges with the heat wave out there. I know it's like historic and crazy hot. What's the high today going to be, like 115 or something where you
Yeah,
are?
yep, 113, 115. So,
Yeah, Fahrenheit for our international friends.
yeah, that's, I don't
Very,
know.
very hot.
Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah,
that
so you had to
Celsius
take
is, but yeah, it's hot.
yeah.
Yeah.
So appreciate you making it happen, and thank you to anybody who is trying to catch up with us live for hanging with us a little later than usual for our start time. But really excited to talk about Star Trek props. This kind of is a similar topic to what we did last week with our sort of not top five, not any kind of structured list, but just kind of talking about our favorites, what comes to mind of a given thing, like a production element. We did costumes, non-Starfleet uniform costumes last week, doing props this week. Really excited to talk about it. There's a lot of nuance, I think, a lot of different levels, kind of tiers of kinds of things, more one-off things, more standards uh, across the different shows. And looking forward to it.
Yeah, so am I. I know there's gonna be we're gonna have another slideshow like we did last week, um, but we just try to put. There's so many. So if you guys
Yeah,
have some, definitely let us know in chat and in Twitter and Discord and all those channels because there is a lot of stuff, and I think just looking at the grouping, it does seem to be like a little bit more not the one-off ones, the ones that we see a lot. And so if you guys have any one-off ones, definitely let us know because I think some of the one-off ones are really cool as well. So yeah,
yeah, definitely, no doubt. Our slideshow is going to be probably mostly featuring the standards, the stuff you would expect to see. Uh, but I'm hoping our conversation takes us to more deep cut places as well, and we can kind of at least touch base on some things that come to mind. Jimmy77's in the chat. Welcome. Thank you for stopping by. Looking forward to hearing your favorites. Anybody else out there? Same to you. Please chime in and share your opinions. Um, but before we get into all that, as we always do, I know I have a short one. I haven't watched too terribly much since last time we did this. Do you have any rewatch recap to share?
I have an even shorter one. I only watched one episode.
Mm,
I think you were cordially
okay.
invited. That was last Sunday, so that feels like a long time. So
Oh, okay.
busy week. Again with the heat and stuff, it's been tough to be able to get to Star Trek. So yeah, it's a wedding episode. A lot of people um, recognize it for that. I think it's just such a great time, such a perfect placement for that episode. I think, especially really heavily, um, kind of post a really big kind of war chunk. I think it's a nice. In series have done this before, where it feels like a breath. This feels like a breath where we're back on the station and they just kind of have like a little kind of ship show um, with just on the station. There are some great props, I think, in it as
Yeah.
well, and some great costume stuff, which we talked about before. So yeah, great episode, really fun. Um,
I mean, I think like you kind of just alluded to the beginning of season 6 and the very end of season 5 are dealing with such huge stakes for the Alpha Quadrant and you know big picture stuff, things that are going to like really impact the entirety of sort of the Star Trek universe, right? Is what's on the line in those episodes. And You're Cordially Invited like shrinks it down to like the most personal stakes. It's these two people getting ready to get married and dealing with the hurdles of getting on the same page and dealing with everything on that front. And I think it's really effective. I think it's a breath of fresh air. Like you said, I think that's probably its best quality. I think the change in tone off of that run at the end of 5 and beginning of 6 is just what the doctor ordered by that point. And there's some good comedy in it. I think it uses the cast really well in terms of their comedic timing and their chemistry. I think a lot of that stuff really works well. Um, good costume, like production elements are really strong. Good costume design, props, a lot of new stuff, Klingon kinds of cool things brought to the table, and
we get
I mean, it is a big deal. It makes a big difference in like the overall lineage of the show. The two main characters get married, and it sort of ups the ante for those two, and changes the whole sort of structure and dynamic of those two characters.
Yeah, it's a very important episode. We also get some fun stuff with the bachelor parties.
Yeah.
Bachelorette
Klingon
parties.
bachelor party.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, what about you? How's your
Yeah.
rewatch going?
It's this week. It's been pretty slow. I watched Apocalypse Rising and False Prophets last night, which is a really interesting 1-2 punch. A high and a low for me. Apocalypse Rising is a great season premiere. I think it's really strong.
Yeah.
Cool. Another one with a lot of the same kinds of things we just talked about with Your Cordially Invited. They're very different tonally, and the stakes are different, but bringing a lot of cool Klingon stuff to the table on the production side of things. Good production design work. I love that hall. I love the world building of this, ceremony where people are honored for their contributions to the war effort, and you have to drink until you can no longer stand. Like it's like an endurance test. It's
so
like
good.
Days long.
And the cast has to go undercover as Klingons. Mm-hmm. They have to dress up as Klingons. It's good.
Different characters have different struggles with that. Like O'Brien and Odo, who's going through his own personal struggles after Broken Link, being made into a solid by the changelings. Very timid and tentative, having to be kind of brought along by Worf. Cisco, I think, kind of comes along a little faster, and I think Avery Brooks plays a really cool Klingon. But some good dialogues, get good twist with Martok being the changeling and not Gowron, but good Dukat stuff. You get a little bit of him on the Klingon Bird of Prey doing his rogue thing. It's a good season opener. False Prophets, on the other hand, is probably in the conversation for maybe one of my least favorite episodes of Star Trek. I just find it like nails on a chalkboard. I really struggle with it a lot. Ferengi are such a sort of mixed bag. I love Quark. I love the Ferengi family in Deep Space Nine. But so much of the rest of the time, they do nothing for me. Especially I think the real thing here is when the Ferengi have to be a legitimate adversary, like a something to actually overcome. When they're the antagonist, it's a real uphill battle to sell that. And I think this is an episode that doesn't come anywhere near achieving it. There's some really silly stuff. I don't like the production design there. I think the guest cast, I think, is not strong. The over the top, silly cast of characters that feel like they're kind of out of a Monty Python kind of a movie down on the planet. They're following the Ferengi sages. I think are just a little too.
You think this is
a little too ridiculous?
Do you think this is Voyager's attempt to try to insert some comedy into it?
Yeah. I think the clear attempt. I think what they had in mind was to go light and to go like with that. I have to think that they had some of that Monty Python kind of tone in mind when they built that set and kind of came up with what was going to be happening on that planet, what that culture was going to look like, and it just doesn't work. I just don't think the writing is anywhere near strong enough. It's not funny enough. It's not witty enough. It just kind of lays there flat for me. And I think it's the stakes are low. They're clear. I mean, Voyager runs into this problem. I think early on they do a good job with it in episodes like Eye of the Needle. When the question of the episode is sort of, are they going to be able to capitalize on this thing to get home? Prime Factors also does it. There are these efforts made to pose the question about whether or not Voyager is going to be able to get home at the end of the episode. And Voyager clearly is not going to get home at the end of the episode. And I think they maybe return to that well a couple too many times. And the stakes are artificially lowered by by that, by making that the sort of question of the hour. Jimmy77 says his main problem with False Prophets is they made it too silly. He should have played it more seriously. Yeah, I think that's probably the core of my issue too. I don't see an issue with going light. One of the cool things about Star Trek, as we've talked about many times, is the Swiss Army knife idea that it can be many things. It can be tonally different things, and it can tackle different genres, and it's malleable. But comedy is a tricky thing to do. It's got to be you got to nail it, and if you don't, it can be really really tough. And it's one of my least favorites.
I would have to agree with that. It's not one of my favorites. It's complete swing and a miss for me. I'll echo whatever.
It stands out.
Yeah.
I think it really stands out because I think the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3 is pretty strong. That late run of like 2 Vicks, resolutions, basics, the shoot. There's a lot of really good stuff there at the end of 2, beginning of 3. So I think False Prophets kind of suffers from being surrounded by really good stuff too.
Yeah, so that only just amplifies the quality.
The struggles. Yeah, I think so. But enough about that. I'm looking forward to my next 2 are The Ship and Remember, both of which I really love. I'll probably watch those 2 today, maybe a little bit more. So I think we should move into the topic of the week and start talking about Star Trek props. We're going to put a slideshow up on the screen now with a wide array of things spanning all shows from TOS all the way to Picard, and maybe even a little beyond. I'm not sure. Everything making up the slideshow. But for me, I think one of the things with this is kind of like costumes. I think, like I said at the beginning, this kind of can come in tiers. You have everything ranging from, real standards. You got things like that are in every show: communicators, tricorders, phasers, pads. Things like that are kind of different variations of the same thing in the different series. And then you have more one-off things. So what kinds of things come to mind for you? Do you find yourself gravitating more towards the standards, the things that are when we started hatching this topic?
Yeah. The things that come to mind first off are things that usually people hold and take with them on kind of away missions, like phasers, like tricorders, things of those things, hyposprays, things like that. I think that's the first thing that kind of comes to mind for me. And I'm not sure why. I do like those things, but I think there's some really cool one-offs as well. But for me, I just think that that's the kind of the first thing that comes to mind. Maybe because they're used so often, they're really like the foundational prop, if you will, if we're kind of talking about props. So it's usually something that someone holds and kind of takes with them on an away mission. So
yeah, that's kind of where my brain goes to. The initial reaction when I think about Star Trek props tend to be those kinds of things. But the more I think about it, the more I can come up with some more deep cut kinds of choices that are memorable. And I think that's sort of the real challenge. I think the stuff that is one off or more of a deep cut that really stands out in your mind because of just how much volume there is, how many different things we get to see and come and go over the course of these shows. If they stand out, if they're memorable, that says something. There's just so much to choose from across the shows. But one of the things that, I kind of hesitate to do this because we might approach some of these things down the road in other kinds of topics, but I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to do it. What the heck? We're here. We're talking about props. Of the standards, I think maybe the best way to tackle some of these standard things that are across the shows. I'm gonna say a thing, and I'm curious to think. I'm curious to hear which version of these things come to mind most for you. Okay, like phaser. Like when you think of a Star Trek phaser prop, what do you have a favorite? What pops to mind?
What comes to mind is the TNG through Deep Space Nine era.
Really?
One.
Cool.
My favorite is probably, I would say maybe Discovery era or TOS era.
the more traditional
one. But yeah,
firearm.
for some reason, it's just that one. Not the Dustbuster early season one. It's like
Yeah.
the one that we always kind of see.
Right.
So yeah, that's the first phaser that comes to mind for me. But that's a great topic idea actually. But keep going.
Yes. And we can double back and hash these things a little bit more thoroughly in the topics for sure with some of these more specific props. But yeah, for me, phaser, it's probably the TNG era one just because there's so much of it. Even though I think if we really wanted to dive in, and I know this is true, our friend Jim from Trek Ranks collects phasers, and he could show off different variations even of that version, like that standard TNG from like season 3 onward. That even gets like refined and modified and gets thinned out and slightly altered across that season 3 of TNG all the way through Voyager and into Nemesis. Like there's different even versions of that basic outline of a prop, but that image is what comes to mind for me. One of those characters holding that phaser, just because it's so different. It's not just a traditional firearm, but I do love the TOS retro, black with silver highlights. That is a classic prop, and I love the one of the things that I love the most about that prop is the way that it comes apart, like that it's phaser 1 and phaser 2.
Yeah,
that is cool and really innovative and detailed. That's a real highlight for me. That phaser has that component. It's actually 2 pieces.
Yeah.
Yep. What about the communicator? Is the
I'd probably say probably TOS era again, because the communicator to me changes to the comm badge, and I'm sure there's a comm badge in here somewhere, but I think of TOS. I think again it's really got a classic look with the again black and then silver flip up kind of attachment. So yeah, I think I would go with TOS as well.
Yeah, I would agree. TOS is what comes to mind. The iconicness of the flipping open. Maybe it seems a little dated today for somebody that comes across TOS now. It looks like an old flip phone, but I don't know. There's something really cool about it, and it just works. I think the prop work and the production design on that level of TOS, I think, is just unbelievable, and there's a reason it stands the test of time. I think there was some incredible work done on those kinds of props. So I'm right there with you. I would go. I prefer the actual thing that you carry as opposed to the comm badge myself.
Yeah.
What about tricorder?
I like the when I think of like the TNG through Deep Space Nine era. I think it's, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's Mark 9 or something like that. The one that flips open and you can see like the bars going up, and it's that's the one that I think of when I think of, because but again, when I think about it, if I think to the TOS era medical tricorders, I think it's all kind of a collection, right? It's a dark tone with an accent color.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do really like about maybe the TOS era stuff, the day-to-day things that we see more often. But yeah, probably TNG era tricorder.
Yeah, I think I agree. I love the interactiveness of that prop. There's so much happening. There's lights and displays, and it's easy to buy that things are happening with that thing, and it's doing things, and that's maybe the thing. But yeah, I totally agree that the visual cohesiveness of the TOS props, the black and silver gold highlights, really is appealing and makes logical sense, and I think is another reason it really holds up and stands up well 55 years later. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the standards. I wanted to find a way to kind of tackle those,
yeah, that's a good
things
way to
that are really, they're kind of out of the way. And I think I'm more eager now to maybe to touch on some more deeper cut / maybe more series specific kinds of things. Things like I just saw a picture of Geordi's visor, for example, which is another one that popped to mind right away for me. That is a prop. And it's so tied to a specific character. It's a part of that character's identity. It's one of the things, and I think one way to maybe measure the lasting impact of some of these things is what are the things that like a layman would know, like somebody that doesn't know Star
Definitely
Trek
Geordi's visor.
Geordi's visor.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that like you go to a Star Trek night at a Major League Baseball stadium. That's one of the things you see people doing. Like that's just like kind of in the popular culture of what Star Trek is.
It's pop
right?
culture, part of pop culture.
Yeah, it's Spock's ears. It's the communicator. It's Geordi's visor. That has like penetrated the pop culture language of Star Trek. So that has to be said. I think that's a classic piece of Star Trek hardware for sure.
Yeah, and similarly, Seven's kind of thing on her face too. That's kind of not as recognizable, but that's one of those props that I felt I should probably mention for sure. And on her hand, and things like that.
Totally agree. Very similar to Geordi for sure. Like it identifies her character. It's so like core to who that character is, and it defines her whole kind of being. Right? Like you can't picture that character hardly without. Even though like somebody like Geordi and even Seven at times have looks that kind of hide those things, and Geordi kind of evolves away from the visor. But still, like when you think of Geordi, at least me speaking for myself, it's
think of the visor for sure.
Think of the visor, and with Seven, it's the ocular implant.
Yeah.
For sure. Jimmy77 points out another TOS classic, the Uhura's earpiece, sort of her Bluetooth. Didn't think of that, and that's so classic.
Such a good pick,
like,
Jimmy.
Like you said.
Oh man, dang it, that's frustrating.
Talk about a revolutionary idea for the 1960s. Common Bluetooth today. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the amazing thing about the original series is that, it's been beaten to death, and it's one of those things I'm sure people who have been longtime fans could jump off a roof when they hear these stories about how impactful the Star Trek technology is, and it's penetrated real world, like that's been discussed ad nauseum, but that earpiece for sure is a major example of that, and is a great shout out for sure. I guess maybe sticking with TOS for a second, another one that kind of comes to mind for me. It's some of the stuff kind of bleeds into, and I guess this is just the nature of it. Like props kind of sometimes go hand in hand with costume design. Sometimes they go hand in hand with production design, like parts of the set. I love, and I don't know, would this be a prop or would it be production design? Like T'Pol's got it too, but really from TOS, Sulu's like pop-up thing and Spock's thing. Like that's set, I guess. More set.
A bit of both, I think.
Kind of.
Yeah. That's definitely the glow on the eyes too. That's really memorable. That's the thing though, is with some of these things, it's hard to figure out which is like set and which is actually just like a prop.
Just maybe makeup, like with the Seven ocular implant, like that's applied by the makeup.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it was built by the prop department. I guess with production,
both.
Things bleed into each other, and it's a big group effort, I'm sure. Jimmy also points out the data rods and ships, also cool. A common USB. We see a lot of them in early TNG, all the way through, really. But I think
then a lot of holodeck stuff as well as those things, I feel like too.
Yeah. Yep. Transporter room. Sometimes they'll pull open a panel and their chips and rods.
Isolinear chips too. I try to find a few photos of those too. Those are kind of cool.
Absolutely.
I like anytime they use those, colored acrylic. They kind of do it in TNG in the conference room. There were some pads that have like the red acrylic ones, but yeah, I just like that red acrylic, or colored acrylic. So anytime we see that in like the isolinear chips and maybe a few pads here and there like that, I think that's cool.
Agreed. Kind of thinking of some TNG stuff. I've seen pictures of things like Picard's flute, the Resican flute from the Inner Light. That's a classic prop.
Yeah.
That I think makes a big difference. The batleth is on the screen right now that I see, at least. I think I'm probably looking at a little bit of a delayed feed here, but the batleth is, an obvious iconic piece of Klingon
weaponry,
visual language, that really defines them. That it's so used, and there's different variations of it, and there's another shot later on of different Klingon weapons that Discovery built, and then on top of that, the
sort of Kalis.
The sort of Kalis is in there. Yeah. The I can't pronounce it. I can never pronounce it. The classic knife from the Surfer Spock that you put back. That's very present as well.
The sides pop open.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah,
that's a great prop. The Klingons are so defined by their weaponry, the things that they use in battle, and I like a lot of that from across all of it. I like what Discovery did with a lot of that. With one of the things that they kind of hone in on in that show at the beginning is that the houses are not unified. So I think there's more variety in terms of what you see. Maybe different houses, different regions of Klingon space use different variations of some of these weapons. It's a little less uniform than we see in a lot of the rest of it. I like that they did, but the Klingons, I think, is packed full of cool weaponry.
Yeah, the style of them kind of echoes how they are as a people and as a culture. I think it's really sharp and dangerous and so that's one thing that I really like about just all Klingon stuff is that it feels of Klingon. It's so I know I used to think of Bajor, but these feel of Klingon. If that makes any sense. Yeah. Yeah.
I just saw a picture of Horgon, which is another classic TNG piece from Ryza. It really defines that Ryza. I think they use that to great comedic effect in Captain's Holiday for what that means if you display it. And there's a story behind it. It's not just a thing you see on somebody's desk. That's another kind of key thing. There's a lot of stuff that I think comes and goes in Star Trek that you see in backgrounds, maybe gets reused. That's a whole nother thing to talk about. Some of these things, some of the pictures that you show in the slideshow here. There's a prop that I think is in Home Soil and then is later seen in Voyager, Pathfinder. It's like the exact same thing. There's a lot of that stuff that is.
I just wanted to put that
very resourcefully.
Because of
that. Yeah, I figured the resourcefulness of bringing things back and having them blend into the kind of visual background of Trek. There's a lot of that, right? But the stuff that gets really fleshed out and has a story and contributes to the overall, and things like the flute from Inner Light and the Horgon. Not only do you recognize it when you see it, you know what it means. You know where it comes from, you know what it's for, you know what significance it has from the planet that it's on, or to the character that owns it. That's a whole nother kind of layer, I think, that kind of allows some of these props to penetrate into people's minds and memories a little bit more.
Yeah, and to be honest, they might be just the simplest of things, like the statue. It's really simple, really small, but when you see that, you get taken back to Captain's Holiday and whatever. So,
he was without sin.
Yeah, another great episode.
Of course. Yep.
For
sure.
Another thing that Star Trek does really well is I think games. They do games really well. I think the chessboard in TOS,
3D chess,
the stuff in Peak Performance. With the attachments and then it comes up on the board. I think that's really cool.
Strategy.
I forgot to put a photo of that, but the games, I think they do a good job as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of that, and it's stuff like that makes the world of Star Trek feel lived in and alive, and gives it lineage, and makes it a place that we all want to live in. If you're spending your Saturday morning watching Trek Live, or you spend any time during the week at all watching Trek Live, if you're watching this, you probably think from time to time, man, I really wish I could live in the Star Trek universe. And why is that? It's because of these things. It's the things like this that give it that lived in, reality, taste of reality that I think makes it so attractive. The Dabo Wheel, Jimmy 77, is another game.
Dang it.
So classic. Absolutely. And that's another thing. Deep Space Nine, that thing
pick.
That's a real thing in Deep Space Nine. That's when you're watching Deep Space Nine, people know what that is, and it carries real weight.
Or
in
what's the other game?
culture.
Oh man, it's another Ferengi game where you advance and retreat, and Dax plays it with.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't believe I'm blanking.
Tongo.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's fun too.
77.
That's another thing we didn't talk about is Gold Press Latinum, the strips, the bars, all that stuff is cool too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Cool.
games. Yeah, there's lots of Star Trek games.
Definitely. Yep. Another statue that comes to mind for sure is the Zephyr Cochrane statue on Captain Archer's desk.
That's cool.
In Enterprise. I think that is really key because I think one of the things that makes Enterprise successful is sort of its tie to First Contact, its proximity to First Contact, and I think having things like that, having Archer's past kind of tied to Zephyr Cochrane through his dad and everything, gives that show like a piece of lineage that touches stuff we've seen before and makes it recognizable. And having Zephyr Cochrane, continue to be a factor into Enterprise is a big deal, and gives that show some personality too. And I've always loved that, and would love to have one. Cyber Honey says she would love to have a Zephyr Cochrane statue. I would too. And it's also, the other cool thing about that statue is there's dialogue in First Contact with Geordi describing a statue of Zephyr Cochrane that is erected on Earth to Zephyr Cochrane,
and now it's
a specific thing. And that is what the statue is. He's kind of like holding his hand up to the sky and to space, and that's the statue on Archer's desk. So it's not just like a random thing. It's pulled from something that we heard in dialogue, which is another really cool deep cut choice.
Kind of similar to that. We can maybe talk about this. Archer, doesn't he have a water polo ball?
Yeah.
And so it kind of ties back to Cisco, how he has his baseball on the desk, and I think that's cool too.
Which is definitely one of my favorites. I've said this a couple of times. I know I've probably said it to you more than once in these years.
Yeah.
But if you walk into my office at work, the only thing that would indicate that I'm a Star Trek fan, if you're smart enough or have enough Star Trek knowledge,
that's a deep cut. Yeah.
On my desk. Yeah. And that's something that I've wanted to do since I was a kid watching Deep Space Nine. I knew when I was 8, 9, 10 years old that when I was old enough to have a desk and have a job, that I was going to have baseball on my desk because that's what Captain Sisko did. And I have one now. So that's definitely one that, again, gives Captain Sisko a lot of personality, and it's such a simple little touch that's so tied to like his most basic character, things that he loves, and he keeps that alive in his. And it adds so much texture to his character, and it made an impact on a lot of people. And I again have it on my desk at work, and love it. Definitely one of my favorites. I like it better than the water polo ball, just because I like baseball better than water polo. But I love that Archer has his water polo ball. I think that's a key thing to do, like to give these captains, these characters, personal touches around their quarters to kind of, give them some personality.
Yeah. Another thing I want to highlight is Star Trek jewelry. I think there's some Bajoran stuff that's really cool. Yeah. I think very distinct to earrings and that character and that species. So when I see something like that, it's just like instantly get. And then obviously I have to mention the class ring, the Kelvin class ring that we see in Into Darkness that we talked about a couple weeks ago. They keep it in, I think, in Beyond too. There's some points of where you can see people wearing them. So yeah, just want to throw those two things out there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's another cool touch. I wish there was more of that in Trek. I think that's a cool touch that I would like to see more of. The class rings from the Academy. Yeah. It's like a real world thing that people have from like their high schools or college, and it's recognizable and human. Cyber Honey mentions kind of going back to like the captain personal effects. Like Picard has horseback riding, like the saddle, and
that's
fencing gear, things like that. Yeah, the Riker has his trombone, like these little personal things that you see.
The clarinet.
The clarinet, things that you can show in people's quarters that don't necessarily need to be picked up and played with in every scene, but remind the audience and continue to build texture and background for
personality for that character. Yeah.
Yep.
Fill out your, because I mean you got to think about it. If you were if you were serving aboard a ship, you would fill it out with personal effects. So it makes sense that we get to see some stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Jimmy77 mentions the Genesis torpedo and
torpedoes in general. That's cool.
Yeah,
we always get to see that. Enterprise has some cool torpedoes. I think the torpedo room, just in general, I think is cool.
Yeah,
but
full of stuff.
Yeah, the Enterprise era torpedoes are cool too, I think.
One of the things that comes to mind really quickly when I think about this too is just Enterprise in general. I think one of the challenges for Enterprise as a series was to, for the first time since the Next Generation, really, and a little bit of Deep Space Nine was having to create like Cardassian visual language stuff with the station. They had to completely go back to ground zero and create an entirely new set of props and pieces of equipment and the way things are labeled and the interfaces. Like the entire production design of that show had to be kind of refaced and couldn't benefit from things you would see in Deep Space Nine and Voyager with carryovers from Next Generation because it's set at the same time and set in the same kind of general vicinity, I guess. Enterprise, everything in Enterprise, I think, visually just pops. I think of like in Archer's ready room, there's like little cases and like diary books and stuff in his shelving that I just think it's full of just stuff that looks useful and has reasons for being there, and it's not junk. Like there's like stuff that actually has purpose. And I think that ship is, because of how scaled down it is and how primitive it is, how small it is, it's got to be like that. The stuff that you see has to carry a purpose. It can't be clutter. And I feel like that show is full of that. I think I think the prop work and the production design in general of Enterprise is top of the line Star Trek stuff for me personally. But what do I know? I'm an Enterprise stan, as the kids say these days.
I like that each kind of individual division has their kind of own set of skills. Like in the medical bay, like there's the hypospray, but it's got the station with a bunch of things that they can pull out and hit that, and we see that in TNG all the way to Voyager and Deep Space Nine, so that's cool. Engineering has a bunch of different tools. Don't even ask me how many they have. They have so many.
Hypospanner, and there's so many of them.
So many kind of not one-off things, but just like really technobabble sounding tools that look a little bit different. So. And command.
No, you're right about that.
And command has like weaponry. So I think each kind of division has its own unique set of tools and things. I like to see that.
That's a great point. I think of like with medical stuff in the Enterprise D's sick bay, the blue and red. I think there's a picture somewhere in the slideshow that kind of shows them, the little blue and red like jars of who knows what. Like there's stuff in sick bay that is really distinctive and feels of a piece with like the medical unit. And the medical tricorder is a little bit different than the science tricorder, kind of across all the shows, which is really cool. And then, like you said, engineering has its own like. There's so many props in engineering. You think of the stuff B'Elanna uses, the stuff Chief O'Brien has, even in Enterprise, Trip has like that hypospanner thing that's like big giant screwdriver that like I don't even know how to describe it, but he uses it a lot. It's really cool. There's a lot of department specific props for sure. In Starfleet.
But it seems like the carrying case is always the same, right? It's always standard issue lockbox.
Little suitcase.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
Going back to jewelry, Jenny77 mentions the Idic and the Kolinar jewelry from Vulcan from the motion picture. You see the Kolinar, like the red necklace that is at the beginning of that movie. There's some Vulcan stuff for sure, kind of like we were talking about last week. I love Vulcan costume design. The Vulcans have kind of similarly to the Klingons are really well, and the Cardassians, a lot of these species, but a very well-developed sense of style and like an aesthetic that is specific and well-developed over the years.
Yeah.
So I would agree. Jewelry from the Vulcans, the props from the Vulcans, stuff that Paul has in Enterprise.
They're hand to hand.
Specific to her.
I can't remember the name of it, but it's got like this half moon at the top. I think that they used to hand to hand combat. Keep going.
From Mock Time and
yeah.
Yep. That's a classic.
Yeah.
Star Trek weapon prop. The stuff in Mock Time for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The Kershara from Enterprise I think is a really cool prop.
Yeah.
That's another piece of Vulcan culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
There's another thing that was in my head.
Yeah.
There was a picture of there's something that I really like is the from Voyager. I feel like we talk a lot about Voyager. There's a couple things that the Doctor uses. He's got his mobile emitter, obviously such a little teeny little thing, but signifies so much for that character, and
at least as
such an important thing.
Yeah, as a fan, when you see that, you definitely get the kind of when you see that you picture the Doctor. It's a very, very memorable, iconical. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, and then his photo, his hollow imager. I really like big bulky camera that doesn't take pictures. It takes holographic images.
Yeah.
That can be, replicated in the holodeck, which is really cool. And I wish we saw a little bit more of. I think that's a really neat piece of Star Trek prop work.
That's a really just neat idea, just in general, to kind of. I don't know if they ever use it, besides maybe in Identity Crisis, but they don't even mention. They don't even mention that the camera. They just use a hollow image of what happened in that episode.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's a cool kind of prop thing. Kind of one-off. We see it a couple times, I think, in Voyager. But yeah, I think it's cool.
He goes through his phase in like the 5th and 6th season, I feel like, where maybe it's just the 5th season, where he wants to carry it around like the going away missions, and he wants to use it.
Yeah.
And to take pictures, latent image. It plays a big part in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like he has a drone. A couple different times throughout that run of the show.
Mm-hmm.
He's got it. There's a picture right now on my screen, at least, of Commodore Decker with his with the little classic TOS.
Oh yeah.
Data discs.
Yeah. They're just painted wood squares.
Yeah. But they're cool.
Yeah.
I've always been like intrigued by them and think they're awesome. They're so simple, but they're so. It's a classic case of like sometimes simple is good. They're. You know exactly what they're for. They carry data. You plug them into your computer, just like. And this is before floppy disks. Like I said a few minutes ago, these conversations have been done to death for sure about how the technology of TOS has been brought into the real world and influenced real world technology. But this is before there ever was a floppy disk, and that's what they were in the 60s in Star Trek. A way to carry data from one computer to another.
And it kind of influences what the props, like isolinear ships. They're smaller and a different kind of material, but they kind of do the same thing. Same with data rods too. It's very similar things. Man, there's a lot of one-offs. The device they put in Moriarty is kind of similar to one of those data type rods. There's a lot of we haven't really talked about this yet, but dishware and mugs and things, really cool. A very large variety of them. Very specific to each show, even specific to the location on the show. I think is like, that's when you know when the budget is just, we can have different types of dishes for different types of places. When the budget's like, okay, we're definitely cooking.
They're in the slideshow, the Deep Space Nine mugs. And the dishware, I think, even like Deep Space Nine, I know that those classic mugs that apparently you can find. I think they're harder and harder to find these days. If they're blue, they're from the Replimat. I think if they're they're red from they're from quarks. A certain kind of green might be like out of a standard replicator and quarters. Like they definitely have like a color coded system for, like you said, for specific locations.
Yeah.
To get these things. A one-off that I love that comes to mind because I just watched the episode is the Quarks mug that comes out of the replicator in the Quickening that Worf is so pissed off about. He tries to order prune juice in the Defiant. And he gets a mug that's just come to Quarks, and that's a cool little one-off.
Yeah.
Silly little thing that.
Yeah. I like
stands out.
Picard's clear tea mug. I think that's when I think of mugs. That's one, and then
holder,
and then Janeway's coffee mug as well.
Yeah,
those two from me from mugs. And the Raktajino one, the bigger kind of, it's I forget what color it is, but yeah, the bigger one.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of the glassware and the mugs, like you said, are classics, and those are the kinds of things that I would like to have. Like I would, at this point, because of how difficult they are to find, if I ever came across those mugs from Deep Space Nine, especially, and they were for not a fortune, I would definitely get those.
Yeah.
That's like if you're thinking about like, and maybe that's another question. Like, are there things, Star Trek props that you would want to have? Like if you saw out in the real world, or you could buy for a reasonable price. Like what are the kinds of things you would want to get because I know there are people out there who collect this stuff. And really own a lot of this. Now, I don't, and I don't think you do either, as far as like having a vast collection of these things.
I do have the class ring, though.
You have a class ring, which is cool.
Yeah. But for me, I think it would be the Batleth, I think it would be cool to have similar, and hang it, and similar to hang it in, like, Worf's quarters, and I think has a Batleth hanging in there. But hanging in my quarters would be definitely cool. I feel like he has this weird black chair thing too as well. Moving on.
Mrs. Trek Live would let you have a Batleth hanging in your bedroom.
Maybe The Office.
In the Office, yeah.
Yeah.
That would, I'm sure, be okay.
But yeah, and then I'd probably go like Discovery era phaser, just because. Yeah, it's updated and it's really cool, and it's similar to the TOS one, which might be my favorite type of. So yeah.
I some of the Discovery stuff just kind of maybe transition into some new Trek. That I love the phaser design. I love the way that it's a sort of a melding of the TOS idea without completely reimagining it. It's a little more bulky and a little less like streamlined and sharp than the TOS version is. It feels of a piece for me. I love the rifle that has like the inner. There's a picture in here of the Where No Man Has Gone Before phaser rifle, which is super rifle, retro, and the sort of original phaser rifle that Kirk carries. I love it, and it's so retro.
Go ahead.
But some of that piping or that the
coiling,
the coil,
yeah.
You see that in the Discovery rifle. That I love. I think that's a really cool touch.
We didn't really talk about rifles. I think the newer, the TOS TNG to Deep Space Nine type of. I just think it gets kind of plain to me. That's why I really like the rifle that's in here with the Where No Man Has Gone Before rifle with the color and the coils, and I think that's really cool.
Has personality. Yeah,
it does.
I've never been a big fan of the phaser rifle that you see in TNG, like early on. Like I'm thinking in like Mind's Eye and Redemption, where it's kind of like the same idea as the general phaser, just kind of extended out.
Yeah, I don't like that.
It's not a huge fan of that prop, and I've never been a huge fan of the rifle that you see at the beginning of Voyager. That has a little bit like
points.
Yeah. I think I appreciate that that's different, and I think they went the right way, kind of moving away from the rifle that you see in earlier in TNG. But I think what they did with First Contact and what you see later in Voyager and Deep Space Nine is really cool. It maybe a little bit plain, not as full of Star Trek personality as you would maybe like to see, but it's sleek and credible looking.
Yeah,
and I like that prop too.
Yeah, if we're still talking phasers, I like the Kelvin timeline era phaser that can switch back and forth.
Swaps. Yeah.
that's to stun and kill. So I think
Yeah.
that's a kind of a cool idea. Anytime anything moves, I think that's cool.
I agree. I do agree. I like that prop a lot too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think movie stuff. Some movie stuff that we haven't covered.
Yeah.
There's some really wacky stuff in Insurrection. Thinking of like there's some really crazy, like the production design choices made for the Sona is so bizarre and over the top, like wacky colors like purples and golds and yellows, and I'm thinking of the equipment that they use for like the de-aging, the unwrinkling stuff. There's some really wacky techie prop stuff going on there. I think of some of the stuff in Generations with I think of one thing that does pop into my mind when I think of the movies is, I know it's not your favorite movie, and it's not one of mine either, but I like it. Generations, the little missile control pad thing that Soren has.
That's cool.
There's some cool stuff going on there that I like. Motion picture's full of stuff too, because that's another. Anytime like you get my mind goes a lot to the beginning of these different eras because of the forced reimagining that kind of just comes along with like the beginning of TNG, the Discovery, Enterprise, things that like kind of force a little bit of a clean slate as far as what things are going to look like, and the motion picture is another one of those things. Everything kind of got retrograded to go into the movieverse, and things like one thing that you never really see again in the motion picture is the watch communicator. That is like a real one-off. That is now again kind of becoming a thing. People now, it's not unusual to necessarily walk by somebody and see them talking into their watch. That happens today.
But does that influence the combat, like the?
I think so. I think they were moving in a direction of wanting it to be something
on them, instead of,
as opposed to needing to carry something that can get taken away so easily, or you can drop. I do. I like a lot of the visual stuff in the motion picture as well.
Yeah.
Just because of how big the scale is and how reimagined everything is. There's some General Shang's eyepiece from Undiscovered Country. Yeah. Agreed.
There's some funky one-off stuff though, with like, especially in TOS and early TNG. There's a picture of something Wesley's kind of experiment.
Oh yeah.
There's also, I think it's in the Cloud Minders, the mask the really skinny mask that's in TOS. That's and it's got the really bright, like almost it's just really bright colors on. It's just, there's some wacky stuff in props, and and those are some of my favorites for sure. They're memorable. I mean, that's part of it, like kind of like you said at the beginning, the things that pop into your head with so much volume, so many one-off things and things that come and go. If they pop into your head, that says something. I like I love the little cannon that Kirk builds in Arena, out of nothing. It's silly and ridiculous, but it's meant to be like this thing that he's building with the stuff around him, the natural resources of the planet, and that's what it looks like. And there's stuff in I just had one in mind with the Devil in the Dark with the eggs, eggs. They're memorable. The stuff in City on the Edge of Forever, the equipment Spock's using to build the what are you gonna say? That's a mark of Star Trek. It's really, especially in the later shows. It's like where every problem is going to be solved by our communicator. We can somehow make it into something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. A lot of crises are averted by taking apart a piece of equipment and interrupting a force field, or
even Geordi's visor.
Yeah, it's used a couple times. Yep. Definitely. Yeah, it's endless. I mean, I appreciate Cyber Honey, Jimmy77, both in the chat, just continuing. Tribbles are another one. That is a prop. That was built by a prop team.
Yep.
Tribbles are a huge one. Great call, Cyber Honey. You guys have really brought a lot to the table as far as, these different options. There's just so much of it. And another one that is probably more, I'm looking at a picture of it right now, is more costume design than prop for sure. But the hat, the NXL1 hat in Enterprise, I don't know what you could call that. It's costume design, but be remiss if I didn't mention it. And another picture just went by is Scotty with that engineering piece of equipment that you see a couple of times.
Oh, the big,
the big thing that he plugs in. It's like a portable power source or something.
Yeah.
He does a lot of cool work with that. Every time he uses that Doomsday Machine and some stuff in season 3, I think. Yeah. That which survives, I think he's using it. That's a really cool piece of equipment. It doesn't get a lot of pub. A lot of the TOS, there's so much of it. There's so many cool props that come and go, and then the standards are so awesome. Yeah. Doomsday Machine's a good showcase for that, because the Doomsday Machine, I mean, the Constellation is so beat up. There's stuff everywhere, like pieces of the ship, and they're trying to build that ship back up. They're using different pieces of equipment. Scotty and Kirk. That I think that's a good example of an episode to look for. I like in Obsession. They have that thing that they use to draw the cloud monster. Is like this floating thing. It's a really cool. I still don't. I'm trying to remember how they do it. It's like it's like a portable piece of equipment that doesn't hit the ground. You know what I mean? Like I don't know how to describe it. I'm terrible with such things, but the thing they use to destroy the monster in Obsession is freaking cool. I think that's like a low key, an anti-grav unit.
They also have some cool stuff in cargo bays where they're like it's just floating, and it's in a Barclay episode. I don't know. Keep going.
Yeah, no, hey.
It's like a cart, but it just floats. And I think Geordi asks him to. Maybe I'm just making this whole thing up, but I don't know. Keep going.
Yeah. I mean, we could sit here all day for sure and just kind of pull things out of our heads. You can just keep going forever because there's so much. There's so much volume.
Yep.
To touch on. And I think we should maybe start wrapping it. I think we're. I think we're at the point where we've kind of hit the things that are most coming to mind. But the cool thing about this topic is that it can go on forever. And like you always say at the end of every show, it doesn't have to stop here. Come over to Twitter, let us know what we forgot. If you're in our Discord server, you want to join our Discord server, hit me up and then come in and share what we missed and share your favorites that didn't get mentioned. Because there are countless examples out there that you can talk all day and not touch everything.
Yep. A little bit of housekeeping. We'll be out next week because in the States it is the 4th of July weekend. So we'll be taking that weekend off, but we'll be back next week with more Star Trek content. So, I think that's about it.
Yeah. We have some topics coming up, I think, for the month of July that we're really excited about. Without getting into too much detail, we got a fantasy draft that I'm really pumped to do. I think it'll be an interesting conversation. That's coming up shortly here.
A type that there's a parameter to it that we've never done before, so be excited.
Yeah, it's not totally hatched yet. We're still kind of figuring out exactly how we're going to come up with the episodes that are going to be populating our list. So I don't want to say too much yet, but I'm really excited about it. I hope you will join us. What would that be, like July 11th or something?
Yeah.
The weekend after the 4th.
Yeah.
That I think we're aiming to do that then. So stay tuned. It'll come out on. We'll announce it on Twitter, I'm sure, in the next week or so.
Yep. And then in the month of July and possibly early August will be another Trek After Dark as well. So this is probably the best time to get if you're not involved with the Discord server. So yeah.
Yeah. Again, if you are not familiar with Discord and you hear us talk about it. If you watch our show or listen, and you need a tutorial, you want to run down on what it is and what it'll do for you and how to get it, you can always send me a DM about it. TrekFan4387. I'm happy to help you get an invitation, get on board. Dan just alluded to it. Trek After Dark is our very casual, usually Saturday night hangout. We do it a few times a year, where we'll watch episodes as a group, like on a video call. If you don't want to be on video, you can just be on audio. You can even enter the call and not be on any of them and just type along and watch us. And we watch episodes together and do like a commentary. We just kind of BS. We play trivia. It's very, very casual. It's sort of like, imagine yourself at a Star Trek convention, sitting around a restaurant table or a bar, talking Star Trek for hours upon hours most of the time. So if that interests you, shoot me a DM on Twitter and I can get you on board.
Cool. That has been episode 175 of Trek Live. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.